Welcome to Business Authority Radio, bringing you insights from today's thought leaders, professionals, and influencers. With your hosts, Neil Howe and Craig Williams.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today we've got a very special guest. His name is Dan Meyer. Dan has a unique occupation, in fact, a calling. He has 39 world records, multiple Guinness World Records, and Ripley's Believe It or Not credits to his name. And he has also won the 2007 Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine at Harvard, and has spoken and performed in 40 countries around the world, and recently made it to the finals of America's Got Talent. Dan Meyer is known as the world's leading expert in one of the world's oldest and most dangerous arts, and that is the world's top sword swallower. But Dan is more than just a sword swallower. In his TED Talks around the world, Dan shows others that the impossible is not impossible, and he inspires others to do the impossible in their lives. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to get into everything that you got to share here. But first, tell us, who is Dan Meyer and what got you started in sword swallowing in the first place?
That's a question I get asked quite often. The reason I got into sword swallowing, I grew up in a very small town in northern Indiana, Michigan City, Indiana. And as a little kid, I grew up with extreme fears. I had fear of the dark, fear of heights, fear of water, fear of sharks, fear of doctors and nurses and sharp objects. I just was afraid of everything. And I could barely speak. I was so shy, an introvert. I couldn't talk to girls. I was afraid of everything. And because of that, I got teased and beat up by the bullies quite a bit. And we didn't know it at the time, but looking back, we realized I grew up with something called social anxiety disorder, which just meant that I trembled, I shook, I couldn't talk. If the teacher would ask me to stand up in class and say something, I would just start to shake and start to cry. And so I grew up with extreme fears. And it wasn't till I was 20 years old and I was serving as a missionary in India for a year that I started to kind of overcome some of my fears. It was the night before my 21st birthday, and my friend, my mentor in India, his name was Greg Ormson, and he said, "Do you have thrones, Daniel?" And I said, "Thrones? What are thrones?" He said, "Thrones, Thromes." He said they're major life goals, like a bucket list. Like if you could go any place you wanted to go, do anything you wanted to do, be anyone you wanted to be, where would you go? What would you do? Who would you be? And I just kind of shook my head and I thought, are you kidding me? I'm too scared. I can barely do anything with my life. Well, this is the week before my 21st birthday, and I came down with malaria fever one night, just a few days before my 21st birthday. And for several days, 5 or 6 days, I was on my deathbed fighting for my life. And all I could think about when I would come to consciousness was thrones, what I wanted to do with my life, if I could do anything I wanted to do. And finally, on the night before my 21st birthday, in kind of a moment of clarity, I came to realization that you can do anything with your life, that fear really is kind of a choice. There's a difference between danger and fear. Fear is a choice. And I realized I had a choice. I could do whatever I wanted to with my life. So that night, the night before my 21st birthday, April 6th, actually, 1978, I made a list of my first 10 thrones of crazy stuff that I wanted to do. I wanted to visit the 7 wonders of the world, visit all the major continents, learn a bunch of languages, live on a ship in the ocean, live on an island, live with a tribe of Indians in the Amazon, work with a circus, work in the music business in Nashville, write hit songs and have songs recorded, just crazy stuff like that. See Mount Everest at sunrise. And I won't tell you if I survived until my 21st birthday or not, Neil. I'll let you figure that out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's some amazing stuff right there. Obviously, growing up and having that kind of childhood is something that stays with you for a while. Now we'll get to the reason that you made that decision right before your 21st birthday in a little bit, but tell me more about I just saw you Tuesday night on America's Got Talent, Simon Cowell and Heidi, the judges. I mean, you really bring some emotion to your performances. I don't know if they loved it or couldn't watch, but it was awesome. You definitely got a reaction. So how did you get started sword swallowing?
Well, after I made that list of thrones over the next 7 years, or 20 years actually, I accomplished most of those thrones. I lived on an island in the Bahamas for 7 years, lived with a tribe of Indians in the Amazon. I worked in the music business in Nashville, then I worked in the music business in Stockholm, Sweden, climbed to the top of the highest mountain in Sweden, moved to London, and it was little by little, one thing after another. I got a little confidence by checking small thrones off my list, and they continued to grow. And as a kid, I always wanted to do things that the other kids could not do. If they wouldn't let me play in their sports games, I vowed I wanted to do real magic, do real feats that the other kids could not do. And so I learned juggling in college, and stilt walking and unicycle riding and fire eating and glass eating. And in 1997, I heard there were less than a dozen sword swallowers left in the entire world. And I decided I wanted to try sword swallowing. So I began studying, I began practicing. I practiced 13,000 unsuccessful attempts, 10 to 12 times every day for 4 years, about 13,000 times, before I got my first sword down my throat in 2001, and then it took off from there, and I started the Sword Swallowers Association International and started touring with Brooks and Dunn in the United States and doing TV documentaries and HBO and CNN and different things like that, and it just started to take off. And I suddenly discovered my purpose and calling in life was, believe it or not, sword swallowing, and it actually all kind of made sense to me. So from there, the sword swallowing has taken off since 2001. I've done it for about, 15 years now, full-time, professionally, in about 35 countries around the world. And in 2006, I was published in the British Medical Journal for a medical research paper I co-wrote on sword swallowing and its side effects. That won me it won the 2007 Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine at Harvard. And because of that, I've gotten to go speak all around the world at top universities, to medical associations and science events and fairs and festivals and that type of thing on the art of sword swallowing and how it works scientifically and the art of it. I got to speak in Dundee, Scotland. I think you've been there at the university
quite
there.
A while there, yes.
And I've gotten to do it around the world, and I absolutely love it. In 2008, I got invited on to America's Got Talent, and I did several different episodes from Nashville to Atlanta. I did the Cobb Convention Center there in Atlanta, which is a big event with about 4,000 people, and Sharon Osbourne and Pierce Morgan and David Hasselhoff and Jerry Springer were there. And that propelled me on. Out of about 50,000 performers, there were 3 of us that went on from Atlanta to Vegas, and then from Vegas to the semifinals and finally to the finals in Hollywood in 2008. And then just a few weeks ago, I got called back again. They asked me to come back on America's Got Talent, and I tried to do something that I wasn't sure if I could pull off there on short notice on their stage with a car that I'd never seen before, but I pulled Nick Cannon in a small Triumph Spitfire car by swallowed sword with no hands, just the sword down my throat and the sword pushing on the bottom of my stomach. So it was quite a thrill.
Yeah, that is amazing. And like I said, I was sitting there watching it myself, and I wasn't sure whether to look or to look away. I was definitely feeling it, and I know you got the whole audience and the judges to love that as well. But talk about when you started. Obviously, if you tried 13,000 times to get your first sword down your throat, that's something that not many people would stick with trying to achieve that. Did you think it was impossible at some point?
I really did. When I first lived in India, I saw these sword swallowers. Actually, before that, I had seen sword swallowers in circuses and sideshows, and I thought, it's got to be a trick. It's got to curl up in the handle. It's got to fold up. It's got to be fake. There's no way. You can't really impale yourself without killing yourself. You can't really do the impossible. And then when I was in India, I saw some sword swallowers in the villages, and that's where it actually started about 4,000 years ago, about 2000 BC in India is the first that we know of it. And so I thought, you know what, if it's possible, I'm going to try and do it. And as a kid, my dad always told me, he said, quitters never win and winners never quit. And so one of the things, being shy and scared and full of fear, one of the things that I learned, though, was to be persistent, that sometimes it's not really rushing to the finish line that always wins it. Sometimes it's being that tortoise and taking little baby steps, one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 year at a time, and being persistent at what you do. And for me, it was that persistence that to never give up that kept me going those 13,000 unsuccessful attempts. And then it took another 2 years to get consistent at it. And then I started having to do shows where people would actually ask me questions and say, why do you do this? And does it hurt? And have you been injured? And I had to actually speak. I'm thinking, what? I hate to talk. I'm too shy. I can't talk. And little by little, I've kind of come out of my shell and learned to become an expert on sword swallowing. And now it just takes me around the world. This is all I do. I just got off the phone this morning with a TV producer in Korea. And it's all I do all around the world. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting life, something that most people don't even dream of. Now, talk to me a little bit. This is a business show, and most of our audience are business-minded people. So talk to me a little bit about the fears and the dreams and why people don't really step out of their comfort zone to get to the level that they need to get to, like you are now.
Okay. A lot of times when people contact me, I get contacted to do a lot of corporate events. I do TED Talks all around the world. I was just in Africa a couple of weeks ago doing the largest TED Talk there in North Africa, and I've done them in Netherlands and Armenia and different places around the United States. And at first people think, sword swallowing, how is that going to impact me and my business? I have no interest in learning about sword swallowing. What the heck? But then when I do a show, I kind of take them through the process of how to learn sword swallowing and the dangers and the injuries. But what really comes down to it is when I kind of explain to people that every place I've traveled to around the world, and I'm sure you have too, Neil, that you find that people have fears and people have dreams. Everybody has that in common. I don't care if it's in a little tribe in Africa or India or South America or Scotland or Atlanta, Georgia, that everywhere you go, people have fears and people have dreams. The problem is most people's fears are bigger than their dreams. And so what I try to do is I explain to people that you can overcome your fears if you make your dreams, your thrones, bigger than your fears. So I challenge my audience, come up with a list of thrones, come up with your major life goals that you'd like to do. Would you like to write a book or start a business or travel the world or, I don't know, swim the ocean or, just something crazy? Come up with your own thrones, your own big ideas, and then go for it. And you can do it. And there's a couple of secrets I've learned for success. The one secret I've learned for success is failure. It takes courage to fail. Mm-hmm. It takes courage to persist and to try and do something over and over and over again and be persistent at it. But then the other thing is to not so much focus on your fears. Everybody focuses on fears, and fears get blown up way out of proportion. I've got a friend of mine, she is afraid to fly because she's afraid the plane is going to crash and it's so far down. And you know what? When you look at the statistics and everything, the actual negative consequences are very, very small compared to her fear, which is huge. Mm-hmm. And for most people, fears are bigger in their heads than they really are in reality. What I've learned with sword swallowing and with America's Got Talent and with all of the experiences I've been through, is you don't have to conquer fear. You don't have to overcome all your fears. You don't have to do it for great periods of time. A lot of times, all it takes is enough courage to do something for 2 seconds or 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Last week when I pulled that car with Nick Cannon in it, it only took about 10 or 15 seconds, and that's all I needed was just to be able to muster up enough strength to pull that off for a few seconds. And that's what I've learned about courage, and successful people are not afraid to take on risks, to push past limitations and actually just go for it. Give it a shot. Climb that mountain. Write that book. Whatever it is that you're going to do, go for it. And if you run into resistance, you can find a way around it. You can find other answers and solutions to it, or find somebody else that can, and you can still make it happen. The impossible is not impossible.
Mm. So, I see this a lot of times in the business world. People are paralyzed by fear, even if it's picking up the phone to call somebody that, might be a little bit higher prestige than they are. But it's just about taking action. And like you said, 10 to 15 seconds and it can be over. You can have the great result. Or what do you really lose if you just take that action? You really get past some of those fears.
Yeah, exactly. I just saw a great TED Talk the other day. It was about 10 seconds of courage. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just that 10 seconds of courage. And then once you get that person on the phone, a lot of times they're very comfortable with you and you end up having a great conversation. And by the time you hang up the phone, you're thinking, boy, I'm glad I made that call. I'm glad I took the courage to go out on a limb and try that. It actually does work. So, yeah.
Things happen when you take action. Now, obviously,
exactly.
you have a magic or an expert ability with the sword swallowing, but why do people come to you? Why do they want you in front of their audiences?
That's a very good question. A lot of times people book me for two reasons. Number one, they want flashy entertainment. They want cutting-edge entertainment that's flashy, that's piercing, that gets people's attention and keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. And Neil, there's a difference between art and entertainment. Entertainment will entertain you for a short period. If you go to a movie for an hour or whatever, that will entertain you. That'll keep you preoccupied for that hour so you forget about your problems back home, okay? So that's entertainment. Art will impact you for a lifetime. Mm-hmm. If you go to a great TED Talk, if you go to a great, just something that's really impactful, it can really almost change your life. And a lot of times people come up to me afterwards and they'll say, man, we have been thinking about your show for a year. People are talking about it at the water cooler 6 weeks later, and it's kind of life-changing when you can do something that impacts people's lives. For me, I always wanted to find my purpose in calling. I always wanted to do the impossible. I always wanted to fly around the world doing superhuman feats and saving lives. And now I'm doing it in a way I never, ever expected. And I absolutely love it. I love impacting people's lives and inspiring them to do the impossible in their lives, to go to the next level, to do something that they don't believe is possible. So when people book me, it's because, on the first end, they think it's just going to be entertainment with an edge, but then they find out it's a program with a point, that it really kind of hits home and impacts people in a profound way. And that's the part that I really love about doing it.
Yeah, I love that program with a point. That's very succinct the way you put it there. But what are a couple of the misconceptions that people have about you and their show? And what do they think afterwards once they've actually seen it?
That's the fun part of it. It's like a good TED Talk or like a good film. I like to keep the kind of the secret twists and the paradigm shifts for the end. Usually when people come to one of my shows, they come reluctantly and they think, sword swallowing is just fake. It's just a trick. It's going to curl up in the handle. It's going to, it's some cheesy sideshow thing. It's not real. It's just cheap magic. And then when they find out it is real, it is life-threatening, how many times I've ended up in the hospital and how dangerous it really is, it kind of creates a paradigm shift in their head. But the other thing is that people always think, well, I could never watch that. I could never do anything like that. But by the time they're done with one of my shows, they realize, no, they can go out and do anything they want to. If this scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid from Indiana can travel around the world and inspire people to change their lives, you can too. You can do whatever you want to do. And so by the time I'm done, a lot of times people will come up to me. I remember this one guy up in Atlanta, actually. He came up to me and he said, I wasn't going to come see your show. I was performing at a church. He said, I really wasn't going to come. My wife stayed home, but I decided I'm just going to go anyhow and go for the show, and we'll see how it is. And he came up, he was ranting and raving, and he said, I called my wife and told her, you missed the best show of your life. This was not what I expected. It was such a surprise, such a paradigm shift. And that's why I like doing it. I like watching people's heads spin around with some of the paradigms and some of the lessons I teach them on how to be successful in their lives.
Well, you've certainly got a unique talent, and you have a calling for helping people with your message. What would you say to people out there? There's a lot of, in the business world and in every aspect of life, there's a lot of gifted people out there, but people just don't know about them. They suffer from obscurity. What have you done to get yourself out there in a big way?
Boy, that's a good question. Well, for one thing, Seth Godin, in his book, The Purple Cow, says you have to do something remarkable. Whatever your business is, you have to be remarkable. You have to stand out and be different than somebody else's business. Well, obviously with me, the sword swallowing, the fire eating, the glass eating, it is remarkable. It stands out to people. It's kind of shocking, and it gets people's attention. But then you've got to deliver with a deeper message. You can't just go up there and do a few tricks and, a couple of card tricks or something, which I don't do. But, you can't just do tricks and expect people to be impacted by that. You have to give them a deeper message, a deeper impact, something that's profound, that changes their life in a profound way. So that's, for me, I try to do the best of both. I try to have entertainment with an edge that is flashy and remarkable, but I also try to give them an impact, a lasting impact that pierces to the heart, something that they'll never forget.
And do you have any stories of people that you have worked with or who have contacted you that said, I've seen your show, I suffered from this, and this is the outcome that your show has helped me achieve?
Yes, I get that all the time. A few months ago, I was doing the Western Idaho State Fair in Boise, Idaho, and after every show, people would come up in tears and give me hugs. And I'm thinking, what? I'm not in a church or anything. This is not a deep impact show, but people would come up and say, you just really inspired us to think outside the box and to do things beyond what we think is possible in our lives. And one guy came back and he wrote me about a 10-page letter about how I had inspired him and everything. I had another fellow, I was doing a TED Talk in Huntsville, Alabama, and this fellow came up to me afterwards, and he just, for some reason, something I said just really impacted him or moved him or resonated with him. And he said, you've inspired me. A year later, he got up the courage, the guts to go out and do his own TED Talk at TEDx Huntsville, and he did a great job with it. So it's fun to inspire people. It's fun to get the emails and the texts from America's Got Talent or TED Talks or Stanley's Superhumans or whatever. When people come back and you get the stuff in the Facebook and the texts and on YouTube, that you find out that it has inspired people's lives, and that's what it's all about. A lot of times when I perform, I can't tell if my words are having an impact on people, and it's not till I see things, sometimes 6 months or a year later, that I realize, you can sow seeds in people's lives and you can inspire other people's lives. And Neil, here's one thing that I have learned about success. So many people think success is about being successful, about making money, about it's what you get. And for me, when I first started out, I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to see all these different destinations. I wanted to climb mountains. I wanted to find treasures. I wanted to, have a career and all this kind of thing. And what I've learned is true success is not about yourself. It's not what you get. It's what you give to others. For me, it's not about the destination. I love to travel and I love doing this all over the world. But it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. Mm-hmm. It's not about the mountain. It's not about the mountaintop. It's about the climb. It's about, it's not about the treasure. It's about the hunt. It's not about the success. It's about the process that you go through to get to that success. It's not about the end result. It's about the endurance that it takes you to get there along the way, and about how you help other people. It's not about the career. It's about the calling. It's not about your profession. It's about your passion, your purpose, what it is that you're put here on earth to do. And that's what I really love doing, is inspiring other people to find their purpose, their calling, their mission in life, and help them do something. And that's what makes a big effect in people's lives.
So take me back. You said right before your 21st birthday, you were still struggling with fear and you had a moment of clarity. How did you get to that moment of clarity, and how do people get there to make the decisions to change their life?
For me, that was probably the lowest point in my life. I had 105-degree fever, about 40 Celsius, for about a week. And I was always unconscious. And when I would become conscious, all I could think about was thrones and what I wanted to do with my life. And for a lot of people, it's hitting that rock bottom, hitting that low point in your life. What I tell my audience is, a lot of times, people say, well, how do you get to be successful? Everybody's looking at that carrot, at that thing up on the pedestal on being successful. And I tell people, look at your setbacks. What were your setbacks when you were a little kid? What was your obstacle, your difficulty that you had to overcome? Was it fear? Was it shyness? Was it social anxiety disorder? Was it being bullied? Was it not having any dreams? Whatever it was, find out what your setback was and use that setback as a setup. What did you do to overcome that setback to use that as a setup for your final payoff? And how are you successful with that now? And I like to try and, get people to think through their lives and think, what was my low point? Was it cancer? Was it divorce? Was it a business failure? What was my low point? Focus on that low point, but don't live there. Figure out how you overcame that and how you can take that message and help other people with that. And that becomes then your setup, your purpose, your calling in your life to be successful in your life.
So what was the lesson that you learned earlier on in your career that really sticks with you today, like a mantra or something that you live your life by every day now?
There's actually kind of a couple of them that are kind of blended together, and I've never really thought about this until you just mentioned it. But for me, it's not focusing on the fears. Don't focus on the negative, on the fears, on the 99% that's impossible. Instead, focus on the thrones, on the goals, on what you want to do with your life, and focus on that 1% that's plausible and figure out how to make it possible. Focus on, where you want to go with your life, and then just take the perseverance, take every little step to reach the top of that mountain to get to that point in your life. And usually that means helping other people to get there. It's kind of like what Zig Ziglar says, if you help enough other people to find what they want, then, that often will help you get to where you're trying to go in your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly great advice, Dan. We've covered a lot of different things, from entertainment and capturing people's attention and basically getting to the point of the message that you want to deliver for your life. If there's one thing that we haven't covered yet that you would still like to share with our audience, what would that be?
The impossible is not impossible. Everybody thinks that things are impossible. No, if something is impossible, it's only impossible until it's not. It was impossible to fly at one point. It was impossible to have electricity, or impossible to have a light bulb, or to have a telephone. But if you just really focus on it, if you figure out what's plausible. When I first was learning sword swallowing, I looked at photos of sword swallowers, and I studied photos of sword swallowers for about 4 years. And I thought, that is impossible. It's 99% impossible that you can put that sword down in your body and nudge your heart to the left and down into your stomach, and, it's not possible. But then instead of focusing on that 99% that's impossible, I started to look at that 1% that if I line everything up, if I repress the gag reflex and flip open the epiglottis and repress the peristalsis reflex and slide the blade between my lungs and nudge my heart to the left and repress the retch reflex in the stomach and go past my liver and kidneys, that it is about 1% possible to do it. And I just focused on what was possible on that end goal, that end throne, that end result, and went for that. And, when you focus on that, you can do the impossible. Sometimes it just takes being a tortoise and doing it slowly over a long period of time. But if you really focus on doing the impossible is not impossible.
Well, again, it's a great message. Now, Dan, if people want to find out more about you or book you for a performance or a talk, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
First thing you can do is you can Google me, Dan Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R, Sword Swallower, or you can go to my website, Cutting Edge Entertainment, INNERTAINMENT.com, cuttingedentertainment.com, and or just look on YouTube or Facebook for me or whatever. But I perform usually for churches, colleges, universities, science and medical events, medical associations, corporate events, TED Talks, museums, just schools, whatever, youth events, fairs and festivals all around the world. And if you're interested, give me a call, contact me. I'm down here in Tampa, Florida. Let me know what you've got interest in it, and I'll be glad to put together a show that'll work for your audience and inspire them to be impossible in their lives.
Well, brilliant. I've really appreciated you coming on with me today, Dan, and I love your message. But what's the next performance? Like I said, we just saw you on America's Got Talent on Tuesday there. You wowed the audience, pulling Nick Cannon across the stage in the car. So what's next?
In the next few weeks, I'm heading over to Amsterdam. I'm doing the grand opening for the Ripley's Believe It or Not in Amsterdam. And then I'll be in Wyoming doing the Lincoln County Fair there for a week, and the Sweetwater Big Wyoming Show for a week in Afton, Wyoming, and Idaho Falls, Idaho. Let's see. Paris, France. I'll be doing France's Got Talent and a TV station over there. I'll be in India for about a week or two in the middle of September, and then I'm doing the East Texas State Fair in Tyler, Texas, from September 22nd until October 4th. So if you're in any of those areas, contact me, come see my show, introduce yourself. I'll be glad to chat with you, and would love to meet you.
Great stuff. So you've made it through to the next round of America's Got Talent. When can we expect to see you again there?
You're just going to have to keep watching on Tuesday nights on NBC. That's all I can tell you.
All right. Well, great, Dan. I appreciate you being on here today. For our listening audience, if you like what you hear, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and don't forget to vote for Dan Meyer when you see him on America's Got Talent.
You've been listening to Business Authority Radio with Neil Howe and Greg Williams. To learn more about the resources mentioned in today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit businessauthorityradio.com.